Good morning, Chris. How are you this lovely May Day?
It's a lovely May Day, isn't it? Good morning indeed. May this sun continue all through the month. I fear it won't, but we can always be optimistic.
We can. I suppose the bonus we have this month is free bank holidays, not two, but we've got the additional with the King's coronation, so bonus for us all.
That's right. Three bank holidays. It's strange, isn't it? Who would have thought that? Is that a good thing for the economy? I think it probably is. I mean, ability, so long as we get good weather as well, ability to spend a little bit of money, enjoy yourself with family and related, I think it's a win-win for everybody.
And certainly if you're in the business of selling afternoon tea, you're probably going to have a good couple of weeks.
I reckon that's right. Either that or football as well, which obviously local parts of North Wales are doing rather well on that front too. So all sorts of options for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Congratulations to Wrexham getting promoted. And I'm going to make a really desperate link now to the world of investments and economy, because we were just discussing earlier about how, Americans are planning their journeys to Wrexham. Just from a global investor's point of view then, Chris, how far along are we of getting the US investor to look outside of the US? Because we know historically they've always invested inwardly. Is that shifted?
Yeah, that's a great point, actually, Rob, and a really great link, actually, because the reality is that America is currently 57% of the world index, unbelievably, which is actually too high. But if you look at the average American portfolio, it's more like 87% invested in America, if not more. When in reality, as investors we know here or everywhere else in the world, you should be diversified between different geographies and related. We can see the way that the world is shifting and changing. It's important to be invested elsewhere. So should the average American be thinking about opportunities here in the UK or in Europe or elsewhere in the world? Absolutely, they should be. Is it likely to happen? I think it is possible for two reasons. The first is that what we've seen over the last 6 months is actually an outperformance of the world outside of America. And we started to see a greater appreciation of that. And as always, a small movement tends to lead to a bigger movement. And actually, generally what I found historically is that when the Americans say, we want to invest in XYZ country or region, that's probably when that story is largely developed. So at the moment, I'm actually quite excited for global investment opportunities because the average American is not that interested, but I can see that growing over the next year. And so I think we have got lots of potential for growth of global investment opportunities. But we're back to that normal perception of the investment world. As always, if something is fully understood or fully appraised, then it's probably fully factored in. But fortunately, not much of the investment world is currently easily invested into. You have to do your research and your thinking and your appreciation of the risks and uncertainties out there. But that makes me excited about opportunities. And a bit like how we have talked at various points over the last 6 or 9 months, when you get those uncertainty moments, that's actually when your opportunity as an investor is at its best. You've got to be greedy when others are fearful. And my perception is still that people are concerned about the world for many good reasons, be it geopolitics, uncertainty in different parts of the world, concerns about inflation, and oh my goodness, are we going to see a recession or something like that? When we have all of those uncertainties, that tells me that the best businesses, the best investment opportunities are actually still going to be of interest to people. So I'm still, fingers crossed, glass half full sort of guy. I'm still feeling good about the rest of this year and looking into prospects for the rest of the 2020s.
Yeah, I think year to date there has been progress, hasn't there? I think there's a lot of issues that have been sort of worked on now and played out, and we see from a volatility things have certainly calmed down on that front. I suppose the next big hurdle then, and it was interesting that in your latest newsletter you alluded to this, which could be that May might be the last month in which we see interest rate rises. How confident are you about that, Chris? Is that, on your scale, is that, a firm favourite?
That is my firm favourite. I mean, as always, when I write in a newsletter, I tend to give my firm favourites because otherwise, the trouble is if you say one thing but it could be another, it becomes almost a bit pointless to say it. You may as well try and say something you've looked at and researched and believe with a passion. I do believe it's going to be the last month for interest rate increases that we'll see in May. And actually, some central banks may choose not to increase them at all. But when I look at the Bank of England, which I guess is our primary concern here in the United Kingdom, my feeling is that this should be the last increase this year, mainly because for two reasons. The first is that slowly, and I know it doesn't feel that way, but the inflationary threat is being reviewed and being impacted. And consequently, the rationale for the need for any higher interest rates is starting to slowly move away. And I know I'm saying that, and everyone's probably thinking, but my food is still going up. And they would still be absolutely correct about that. But many other things in the broader economy, we've started to see pricing start to come down, or reflecting the fact that inflationary increases can't be sustained. So that's the first perspective. The second is that we've already seen a decent rise in interest rates back to levels which those of us of a slightly previous generation will remember as being perfectly normal and perfectly reasonable. We've moved away from those very ultra low levels of inflation and interest rates that we saw during much of the 2010s. We're now back to what I would call more sensible levels, more levels appropriate for the backdrop that we could see. And given the fact that economic growth is not going to be fantastic, and bad news for any politician thinking about elections over upcoming months or the next year or 18 months or something, is probably going to remain that way. It's still a tricky backdrop out there, not just in this country, but much of the world too. So consequently, the rationale for higher interest rates is going away. So I think that this should be the final month. If I was on the Bank of England's board, my recommendation would be raise interest rates slightly in May and then hold for the rest of this year.
Let's wrap up with one last question then, Chris. We've got a client seminar in June. What are you most excited about then in the world of investments between now and then, something that we can maybe look back and go, yeah, that's an interesting area that is certainly playing out?
What I'm most excited about is that I'm amazed still that more people, more companies, because let's face it, when we talk about investments, we ultimately have to talk about companies or corporate backdrops or things like that. When I look at what companies are saying at the moment, they're still generally saying that they are seeing a positive outlook for 2023 and into 2024. And I'm still amazed that we've entered the start of this year and actually the start of this earnings season sort of fest of clients reporting, with most analysts believing that companies were going to be cautious about the rest of this year. Now, my feeling is that by the time we come to June, we'll have had 1,001 even more companies reporting. So we'll have a brilliant insight about what the average company in the average country is thinking around the world. We'll have that full insight. And I reckon we will conclude that actually most companies are saying it's not impossible out there. There are things that we can find to do. And therefore, as a company, we're finding things to invest into. So that will be my big insight, I believe, for June. It will be that the world is not impossible. You know, that kind of those concerns, those issues that we can all still see out there, they're counteracted by a bunch of positive issues out there too, which are still relevant and are still meaning that opportunities for investors are still out there, still there to exploit and to benefit from over the medium term. I think that's my key focus for June. It's that insight from not just from central bankers or from what we can read on the TV or see in the newspapers, but also what we're hearing from the average company out there too. Bringing all of that together and getting that really good insight into how the world is feeling and really acting at the moment and what prospects are like for the future. That's what I'm focused on.
Yeah, you know what? I think that's a really healthy thing to focus on, isn't it? Because it's so easy to get distracted by central banks, by governments, by the press that clearly have an agenda to push. Fundamentally, what is the average company saying? Because that's ultimately, you know, where we get a job is from those businesses. So yeah, I think to focus on what they're saying is the right thing to do. So yeah, we'll see where we are in June.
Absolutely, we'll see whether they're feeling worried or excited. All I know is it's not boring. And in the world of investment, it's never boring. It's always exciting. And there's plenty of good and bad things that could happen. But ultimately, I think the important thing is for any investor over any time period is to stay involved, keep thinking, keep asking tough questions. And believe me, you get the rewards from that over time.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chris. Great to catch up again. We'll see you in June for our monthly call, and then later on in June we've got our client seminar. So until then, yeah, stay safe.
Sounds perfect, and hopefully the weather will be great too.
Brilliant. Cheers, Chris.